This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
I find it very interesting the information you found of that's out there that victims are more likely to be someone on the spectrum versus being someone on the spectrum executing it, and I wonder how accurate that stat is. Number one, if it's
I named it. So it came from a small body of literature suggested that rather than being more likely to engage in offending or violent behavior, individuals with autism spectrum disorder may actually have an increased risk of being the victim rather than the perpetrator of violence, from a study done by Sobsey, Wells, Lucardi, and Mansell, 1995.
But that's also, well, okay, even 95, we're going way back on this.
Way back.
Way back before we even really had a huge grasp on what this is.
Because there's not much out there on it.
No, and there wasn't much, there really was hardly anything out there on it back then, especially compared to what we know 30 years later. Yeah. Because I would almost argue, I mean, when we look at the cases that we look at, that you have more than not that are very likely on the spectrum than are. So I mean, I think it has a lot to do with just data and knowing if someone is or not. I think a lot of people just live their whole lives with no clue. And so I think if we truly, if you evaluated every single person that went in for a violent crime or something, and to determine are they there, I think it's the other way around, quite honest. That's just my conjecture. And obviously it's a 95 study. And I'm surprised there's not more, surprised that hasn't been looked at closer.
I know, it's like when this came up, I was really shocked. Like we were just saying that you and I have not had this element of any things we've covered ever come up before.
Well, we go to psychopathy and all that so quick, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it does mimic in certain.
And so let's examine, we can take a quick examination as the why of that as well. And I think because, to your point, forms of autism, excuse me, on that spectrum are so common with so many people that it's kind of a background noise that is always in our society anyway. Yeah. And so it's such a part of everyone's whole that it can never really be measured as accurately as I think, especially when it comes to court of law.
I think it's so broad of a term as well. And I think it's something that needs to be honed in a little bit and not just, it's like saying food. Do you like food? Right. Like, yeah, there's all different types of food. What are we talking about specifically? Well, food, it's food. Like there's a lot of variations in this.
Or even saying, like, hey, I'm someone who's easily distracted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who isn't easily distracted? It's all varying degrees.
Sure.
So, we all see shiny things. Sometimes it takes me 5 seconds to look at the shiny things. Takes you one. Takes someone else. They completely ignore it.
It's a very large catch-all that's still out there. The prosecution doesn't want any mental health information coming into trial. They now have copies of everything, and they're going to be filing a motion, if they have not already, basically to get that info out of the trial. So it cannot be used as an argument. It can't be used at all. Just not going to be something that they want in there. What do you think? I don't know if that's a great idea on the part of the prosecution. I mean, the prosecution, obviously their goal is to prosecute this man and find him guilty. Death, I don't know that needs to be the goal. It's certainly a possible punishment, but if we're looking at convicting, I think this actually can work in their favor more than it works against the prosecution.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd love to know what's in their minds. Since they're making the action, all we can do is sit here and kind of imagine ourselves as them as to why they would take that action and what the outcome they're seeking of it is. So the outcome that they're seeking is to get a conviction. And at this point, since they have solid data to support what they want to do, they don't want anything to take away from the data they have, like the DNA evidence and cell phone evidence and things like that. And so that since they know that defense is going to be focusing on the emotional aspect of things, I think they want to remove any possibility of an emotional rationale that someone's going to use. Well, yeah, he did this. It was still a choice. But because of this, because of his mental issues he had, is why he did it. In other words, I think they're trying to take away excuses that that Ann Taylor is going to put out there
Yeah.
as to reasons why he did this is because he suffered this, he suffered this, he suffered this. I think their prosecution becomes easier potentially if you're just looking at the DNA. It's his DNA. It's in the room. It's on the knife sheath. You know, the cell phone data says he was there. The car's in the neighborhood. He stalked it. The cell phone was on every single time he went by there, except the day that he committed the murder or assumed, you know, that he's accused of committing the murder. So I think they want to just really, really, really rely upon the actual evidence rather than have any possibility of sympathy creeping in with mental issues.
But do you think there would be enough sympathy there to find him not guilty or acquit?
No.
I would think, yeah, I would think that even if, I think it explains him more.
All right.
I think, I mean, and if the defense is solely basically operating on the grounds of, let's save his life, and they're pretty much abandoning everything else, which I don't know. I mean, it feels like we're getting close to that point without without saying it out loud. Obviously, they're going to try and fight for him. I would be shocked if they went in there and used this as a defense simply just to save his life, you know, or if that would end up being a plea deal of some sort. That if they even want to offer him a plea deal on this. I mean, certainly it would save the taxpayers. It would save the community from having to go through a whole hellish trial. But I don't know that the community would not want to have that trial take place either, even though it's many, many, many miles away in Boise and all the families are going to have to travel, which is a whole other issue. I don't know. I mean, would this be something, if it were to be settled like that, of, look, admission of guilt, and you're not going to die, but you're going to prison for the rest of your life? Do you see that being a happier ending for these families psychologically, or do we need to go through the motions of the trial, which will likely eventually, you know, lead to him either being killed or put away forever? Other things could happen, but
Yeah, I only the families can answer that question, really. You know, about what it is they need to feel complete and whole and move through the pain they're moving through. And I think, because again, not being the lawyer, not being a legalized expert in any way whatsoever, I think they're beyond, from what we're seeing, I think they're beyond any sort of plea deals. I think it's gonna go through one way or the other.
yeah.
So again, I don't know why they're taking that action, why prosecution is taking that action. All I can do is kind of do my best, you know, throw ourselves in their shoes and what potentially could be it through our conjecture, and kind of looking behaviorally at it. But again, I think everything that's going on now is really geared at the jury or the potential jurors that are coming in.
Is ASD, autism spectrum disorder, something that should be better understood in terms of law enforcement, in terms of investigators, in terms of just looking at some of these cases? Because again, we often go to the triad, the psychopathy or all sorts of other disorders that could be going on over there, like in the anti-personality scale. But is that something to consider more, that should be understood more to better understand the people that you're investigating? I mean, let me ask you, when you were in the counterintelligence world and stuff, is that something that ever came to mind with individuals that you were investigating of, this person might be over here and this might explain some of the behavior? How well is that sort of stuff integrated into understanding others' actions?
That's a great question. I never, ever, in the course of my career, had a situation where I took an action or mitigated what I was doing based off of someone claiming or saying they had autism. Matter of fact, I never had any case where it even came up. That's why this is literally the first time in my career where autism came up as kind of the forefront of something that someone's going to use. Now, did I have knowledge of someone's potential autism spectrum? Yeah, every now and then you did. But what it did, it became part of a way to understand someone at a deeper level so you could communicate more effectively. Because remember, everything that I ever did came down to how do you form a relationship so that you can share information, get information, and protect national security of the United States, protect our country, our society, protect our state, local. I mean, so it all came down to how can I communicate more effectively and better? And if autism and where someone was at on a spectrum, I didn't ever look at a diagnosis of autism. I always looked at what's that mean for communication? What's that mean for our ability to form a relationship and a bond? And it never was a situation where it was a hindrance in any way.
Yeah.
It just became, one more data point for a way that I need to communicate more effectively. So I was never looking at the autism. It gave me maybe some way to look at you, but I'm always just looking at your behavior. I'm looking at how do you need to connect with me? Because this is all the bottom line. It always is.
Yeah.
What can I do to inspire you to feel safe with me? What can I do to inspire you to feel safe with a decision to cooperate with me?
Yeah.
And so in the courtroom, that's the basic thing they're trying to do. The defense, Ann Taylor, right? She's strategizing this. What can she do to inspire the jury to feel safe and comfortable with acquittal?
Mm-hmm.
And on the opposite side, what's the prosecution doing to inspire the jurist to feel safe and comfortable with themselves with conviction?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all. And so part of that is, how do I need to communicate that feeling of safety and trust with what I'm presenting them?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in all these situations.
Sure,
So
it's everybody. Yeah, everybody is different. Everybody has different things that you're going to have to speak to, so they feel safe and comfortable communicating with you, and you have to craft that for each individual. It's not a here's one size fits all. I wonder how Kohberger is feeling about this angle. I wonder. I do wonder, because we look back, and this is just pure conjecture. He seems to recognize, when he talks about the visual snow and stuff like that back in his teen years, that he recognizes that there's something different going on. And we don't really know a whole lot about his demeanor today, other than what we've heard from students and coworkers of, oh, he's kind of odd out there and not very personable. So I wonder how accepting he is of this, if he just knows that, yeah, that's who he is, or if he'd want that even to be out there. At this point, he doesn't have much of a choice. I mean, he's literally fighting for his life, but he seems to be someone who thinks he's in a lot of control. And people who are in a lot of control don't necessarily, or are not necessarily, super fond of things out there that they may view, although it may be incorrect, that they may view as a weakness or something that would make them less than, which, being on the spectrum, does not make someone that. But I could see someone with that sort of, godlike, complex ego not being super happy about that.
So putting on my if I was Kohberger hat,
yeah,
as challenging it might be, you look at his data points for his life arc. He, from everything that we've seen from the small little things we have throughout his life, he's been pretty curious about trying to understand himself. That's why he's going into this line of work. I would think, again, all these other things might pop up. His rage, his lack of feeling control, or someone labeling it, all those things might be in there. But at the same time, though, he seems to be a pretty curious individual and more on the science than emotional side. My bet is he's, when she mentioned it as a possibility, I don't guarantee. I'm pretty sure that she's the one that came up with this idea. And she probably presented it to him, and his next steps was probably to get really curious. Because he's been trying to understand why he is like he is for a long time, and this might be one deep dive he might do it as well, maybe.
I mean, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anybody, but I mean, just watching his behavior, right away, I was like, oh, he's totally on the spectrum. I mean, I could say it immediately, almost. So again, I would not be remotely surprised by any means. It would be very interesting to see where they take this and what kind of defense this provides them, if any, or if the judge again says, yeah, nice try, no.
The latest true crime stories, expert breakdowns, and shocking twists, all in one place. Press subscribe now to the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.